Because we got Stalin there on the left. For those of you who remember Stalin, he was a really nasty dictator in Russia about, 50 years ago. And on the right, we have Mao, who was a really nasty dictator in China about 50 years ago. And the saying underneath it says, an indestructible friendship. How long did that last? 5 years? Did it ever exist? The human soul, a lot of people think is indestructible and it will just continue on, just like Stalin and Mao's friendship. Some people believe in reincarnation. They just become somebody else and somebody else and somebody else, and you might get back to be human, you might get to be a god, and some people believe that. Others conjecture nothing and believe nothing. And there's a lot of people like that, and some of them are just way too busy, involved in this world, involving themselves in this life, what they can get out of it, what they need to do, the relationships that they have here, to ever think about life after death. And there's a lot of people in this world who believe that. In approaching all of these people, Jesus appeals only to Scripture and to our experience with God. And when we talk to people about the resurrection, I think we need to follow his guidelines. We need to follow his example. That would be good, wouldn't it? Follow Jesus' example. Anybody not want to do that? No? Okay. Now, one of the things that Jesus does not do is talk about the resurrection in scientific terms. Try to prove the resurrection, either through like near-death experiences. Oh, yes, I believe in the resurrection because I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and I just want to continue on, and I know that it's real. Well, I think the best scientific evidence says that when most people wake up from near-death experiences, the first thing they feel is terror. And then they start saying, oh, no, I couldn't have felt terror. That must have been wrong because I'm good to go to heaven. And so then they change their minds, and then they feel all sweetness and light. So I don't think, since Jesus didn't go and talk about near-death experiences, I don't think we ought to. Sometimes people talk about weighing the body and saying how much does the soul weigh after it dies, and there's a weight change between the time you die and the time that, the next moment. I think we ought to leave all of that alone. Some of it's kind of goofy to think about. No, that's all right. But Jesus doesn't use that to argue with, and I don't think we ought to either. Our faith in the resurrection is reasonable, but it is still faith. I think we need to understand that it is reasonable to believe in the resurrection. God gave us life. God can give us new life. Jesus was raised from the dead. 500 people saw him after he was raised from the dead. I would believe 500 people who came to me one after the other and told me something was true. I would tend to believe that. We have a reasonable faith, but it is still faith. We have to know that God will take care of us. I don't know anybody personally who's come back from the dead. I know some people who were close, and we gave them a little shock, or we gave them some epinephrine, but I don't know anybody who's come back from the dead. I still have faith in the resurrection. Our faith in the resurrection is based on the power of God. That is what we believe in. That is what we must trust in. And that alone. Not science, not our wishful thinking, the power of God alone. Our hope can't be based on that wishful thinking that longs to survive after the grave. Some people think that there's a heaven just because they want it to be. But that can't be right. Just because you want something, what did my dad say? If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. Just because you want something to be true doesn't mean it's going to be true. We believe in God who makes life and will make us alive. The same God who gave us life in the first place can give us life after death. Jesus isn't interested, though, in carrying out this dialogue with these people who really do not want to believe. That's not something that he was really into. He proved to them, I think satisfactorily, that the resurrection existed. But he really doesn't want to carry on this dialogue. Mark doesn't say, Jesus doesn't say, that the Sadducees were shocked at his answer. Now, every other time Jesus gives a great answer like this, the people are going, oh, wow, I never saw that coming. How did we not see that? The Sadducees weren't going to believe Jesus no matter what he said. Most people do not come to Christ, do not come to faith because we argue them into it. They need to make a choice in their life. I think we need to present arguments. Jesus presents arguments to the Sadducees, even while he knows that they are probably not going to follow after him. I don't know whatever became of these guys, whether they trusted him or not. But Jesus knew that most of them would not follow him. But some of them might. And he presents his arguments for faith. We must present arguments for our faith. Now, one of the reasons for that is because the media gives its fantasy version, and we need to answer all of the stuff that's going on in our world. Heaven Can Wait. Anybody remember this movie? Warren Beatty? I liked the movie. It's kind of fun. It's a football movie. But in it, this really nice guy, but all he really thinks about is football and weight training and being healthy. He dies inadvertently. God, somehow or other he died and he wasn't supposed to. His time wasn't up, but the angel of death took him anyway. And, he's in heaven on the clouds waiting to get onto the plane that would take him on to heaven. No faith, no relationship with God, nothing. Everybody just gets to go on the plane if they're good. That's what this movie promoted. Now, this is probably a movie more of you know. It's a Wonderful Life. In this movie, the view of heaven is that everybody dies, and then after a few years, if you are really good and practice and help people as an apprentice angel, third class, whatever clearance was, you get your wings when the bell rings. Well, it's not true. We never become angels. In these verses, we become like the angels in one respect. We are neither married nor given in marriage in heaven. God is saying relationships are changed when we get to heaven. We don't know what they will be like, but we do know what they aren't. Doesn't give very much information. But, this is just plain wrong. I like the movie, but that's all right. This one I really like. In this version of heaven, cars fly. I just put that in there. This is from some video game, too. I don't know what it is. But I would like this version of heaven. But, wishful thinking doesn't mean that it's going to happen. We need to answer people with the truth. And one of the very basic truths is, if there is no resurrection, we are stupid. We are fools. Paul says, to be the most pitied people in the world because we have sacrificed our lives. You have sacrificed a perfectly good Sunday morning to come and hear this. And if this isn't true, you have wasted a lot of time. And that's what Paul says. But it is true, and you haven't wasted your time. We need to look at what Jesus says and figure out what to emphasize and what to ignore. Jesus rejects the Sadducees' mistaken opinion of what's going to happen in heaven. He seizes, though, on a relationship that we have with God. That is what is important when it comes to the resurrection. The relationship that we have with God. Not what heaven is going to be like. We can talk about that a little bit. But the most important thing is, do we have a relationship with God? Our images of heaven tend to be what we think of on earth. I really like a heaven where you can have flying cars. Cartoons depict people as floating on clouds, occupied with the same concerns that they had on earth. Ghosts are still involved in earthly things. I can't go to heaven because I have unfinished business. And I think that was in the movie Casper. I like this one too. I'm going back as a ghost. It's time I gave something back to the community. I just need to be involved. Well, this isn't what God says heaven is all about. It is not a continuation of life, but a lot of people think that it is, except without all the problems. Instead of having a family reunion where you fight or you argue or you bicker or you whatever, everything's fine. That's what heaven is all about, according to this one view. The problem is, in all of these, is that our meeting with God, when we get to heaven, always seems to take a back seat. And we cannot let that happen. We cannot let that happen. Now, I think a lot of people let it take a back seat.